order at 8:29 a.m. Let's see. Richard, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Richard.
Judy, would you please do the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Kelly? Here. Ms. Cavanis?
Here.
Mr. Jurdy?
Here, and I can confirm that the meeting was properly posted last week at the county library in Fort Bragg and that the room has been unlocked since shortly after 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. Cromer?
Here.
Mr. Shoemaker? Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Swope?
Here.
Ms. Pierce is absent today. Mr. Land?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, members of the public are welcome to address the board on subjects both on and off the agenda. The board is prohibited from taking action on matters not on the agenda, but may briefly answer questions. Public comment on individual agenda items will be allowed at the time an agenda item is discussed and is limited to 3 minutes per person. Individuals wishing to address the board under public comment are welcome to do so per the instructions. Do we have any members of the public wishing to make comments at this time? Okay.
There is no public comment.
All matters on the consent agenda, are there any comments or discussion on the consent agenda? Okay. Is no discussion? Okay. The consent agenda is approved by one action without discussion. Next on the agenda is the discussion regarding the historical benefit review project status report and project updates. Director Rentschler.
Thank you, Chair Cavanis. The report is provided in your packets. I did want to point out that the counts for April, which reflect 15 corrections, are actually items, the majority of them, all but 4, that were previously completed but not reported to the board. They got omitted from the monthly reports, and that's why they may reflect dates from like May of 2021. There were 4 corrections that were actually processed this month. There's about 60 corrections still outstanding that are unrelated to a service purchase issue that we're waiting for direction on from the IRS as far as our application. And that's where it stands at this point in time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions on the project.
Seeing no questions, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Okay, next on the agenda, there is discussion and possible action regarding investment matters, and presenter Reveles. Mr. Reveles.
Morning, trustees. This item is an overview of what I personally experienced working with Callan through their due diligence process. I had mentioned it in the previous update last month with the recommendation, but this memo provides a little bit more detail on my experience there with them. Of course, Callan's going to be here next month to do the quarterly review, and they're going to speak to their own due diligence process at that time.
Excuse me, Robert.
Yeah.
Trustee Jurdy has raised his hand.
Oh, sorry. Trustee Jardy.
I could wait till Robert finishes his comments.
Okay.
So I could briefly outline the high points of the memo. Callan has over 200 professionals that they employ, half of which have an advanced degree or a CFA or a Kaya designation. So they've got a number of resources. Callan's process basically starts with client profiles, laying out who is this client and what are they looking for in terms of that search. In our case, that would have been the SMID search. Secondly, they lay out these manager profile. What are the proper vehicle types or strategies that are being looked for? And those two profiles really direct the process and review of the qualitative factors and the quantitative factors. Qualitative factors being key people, what sort of turnover the strategies have, what sort of disaster recovery plans are involved, do the funds utilize ESG, do they have a direct policy or in any way, and the quantitative factors are vehicle types, product AUM, weighted market cap, holding periods, turnover, performance. There are a number of different quantitative factors that I mentioned in the memo. And then finally, sort of that final process being review by multiple teams for multiple meetings to determine, to ensure that all of the requirements in the client profile and the manager profile actually fit whatever strategy would ultimately be recommended to the client. So,
Thank you,
with
Mr.
that,
Reveles. I'm sorry, sir, or do you have additional? Okay.
no.
Trustee Jardy?
Yeah, thank you. So I appreciate Robert's providing a report to the board on this process. I think I have a little bit more transparency into Callan's process. I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say at the next meeting. But I also feel it's important for the board and for the public, the plan sponsors, the plan members to know that Callan actually receives funding from other sources other than simply investment funds like ours or endowments, et cetera. And they have a somewhat unusual arrangement in that they also receive funds from the fund managers that may be held by plans like ours. And they do disclose this information. And I believe this information should be disclosed as part of this report or attached to this report. So I've supplied a memo this morning outlining, I actually referenced an annual disclosure that Callan published on their website, which was a very general disclosure. And in that document, they say that plans such as ours per company policy can request the funds that Callan receives from these fund managers. So my question is, because we do have 10 actively managed equity funds, 2 actively managed bond funds, 2 real estate funds, and 2 infrastructure funds, and that millions of Americans would say that those funds are relatively expensive compared to funds that many Americans personally choose to go with. Not a commentary on the quality of the funds regarding their fees, but they are higher than many Americans are willing to pay. That given that, and given the fact that Callan does receive compensation from, they say, from many fund managers, I believe we should avail ourselves to this policy and be informed. The plan sponsors, the plan members, the public deserve to know of these 16 actively managed funds, or 16 funds. Does Callan receive compensation from any of them? And if so, how much? They say in their policy that we have the right to ask for that information, and I believe we deserve to have that information.
Are there any other comments or discussion? Is there any more discussion on this agenda item?
So I would like to comment just briefly. This memo is intended to relay my experience in the due diligence process. It's not a commentary on Callan's business model, which, they have multiple business models that they use. They invest, they counsel funds like us. They counsel independent financial advisors, and they work with investment companies, investment managers, to relay the best way to communicate and get information to both funds like ours and independent financial advisors. So that's not necessarily a comment on this. If you do read the ADV that Trustee Jurdy is referencing, you'll see that the maximum dollar value that Callan would receive in one of these instances while they're working with those managers is about $115,000. $115,000 times 16 funds. If they are all paying the maximum amount, I'm sure that not all of them are, that would be $1.8 million. Now, that's not $1.8 million for access to this board. That's for education and research and support that Callan provides those managers for all their strategies, not just the ones we're in.
Thank you, Mr. Rivers. Any other discussion? Trustee Shoemaker?
I appreciate the point you just made about those fees. And Dan, you've made a statement here. Are you making a request or are you just making a statement?
I am making a request. I would like to make a motion that we direct MSERA staff to request of Callan. It would go
Why
to
don't you skip the motion and just say, can we do that? And we'll nod our heads or one way or another. It's not an action
Okay,
item. It's
that
not
is-
an
yes.
action item.
Yes, that is my request, is that
Okay.
we ask for this information to be provided to the MSERA board.
So does anybody have a problem with that? No. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Ask and ye shall receive, Dan.
Okay, so, by Trustee Comer?
I understand direction's been given to staff. My question is generic for Mr. Revelis, and if you don't know the answer, we can defer to Callan. Is this a standard practice with most investment consultants of this nature?
This process?
This process and the fees that Mr. Jurdy is referring to?
Well, in terms of the fees, I would guess it's probably a no.
It's not a standard.
Probably not.
Okay.
Standard, no. Is it, unique to a few investment firms? Likely it is. Could we find an investment, advisor that doesn't have that part of its business? Probably.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion?
I think Trustee Jurdy has his hand up again.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Just information. This practice did cause concern by the previous manager, James Wilbanks, and he supported changing from Callan at that time, but the majority vote on the board was to keep Callan.
Thank you, Trustee Jurdy. Mr. Revelis, would you like to discuss the monthly investment performance report?
Trustees, you have the monthly investment report. You can see what happened. We had a pretty decent month, total fund return of 2.3%. Of course, that doesn't include updates to real estate and infrastructure, JP Morgan in that case. We remain underweight our fixed income. We're overweight U.S. domestic. We continue to take cash distributions from our infrastructure managers, and we are now reinvesting our real estate distributions since we've got that sort of back down near target. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there any board member discussion on this? Is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Thank you. Seeing none, moving on to agenda item number 4, discussion regarding results of Probolsky Research Membership Survey. Director Rentschler?
Thank you, Chair Cavanis. Today with us, we have Elise with Probolsky Research. They performed a survey of MSERA membership that was part of our strategic plan, and she's here to go over the high-level results of that for the board. I would like to thank Elise and Adam for all of the extra time they spent answering my questions and providing me with extra level of detail into the results. It's been very helpful. You will see things being added to the strategic plan, board work plan upcoming related to the information that we learned from this result. So I'll turn it over. Alish?
Thank you, Doris. Just give me 1 second. Get my share screen going here. Great, thank you. As the director said, I'm here representing Probolsky Research to discuss the results of the membership survey that we conducted for MSARA. So just to give a brief overview of the survey methodology. So this was a survey that was emailed out to your members. They had the option to complete the survey online, or they had a telephone number that they could call in to complete it over the phone if they so chose to do so. It was available in English and Spanish, though most did take it in English. We had about 484, well, not about, we had exactly 484 responses, which yielded about a 4% margin of error based on your membership size. It was fielded for about 3 weeks. So the purpose of this survey was really to provide sort of an overview of where MSARA is at in terms of how membership sees how you're doing, their approval ratings, what's going on, as well as their preferences and what they'd like to see moving forward, concerns that they have, etc. These are surveys that we generally recommend completing on an annual or at least an every other year basis, just so that you can see, as the director said, this information is being used for strategic planning. And so to be able to sort of track your progress over time is really valuable. And the more live time that you can get on that read on how those strategic initiatives are doing, the better. At minimum, we would recommend repeating a survey like this at least every 3rd year, though we would certainly encourage it to be either on an annual or a biannual basis. So as she said, I'm just going to go over a high-level overview. There are additional findings, a lot more nitty-gritty stuff that we have provided for the director and her staff to really dig into, but I'm happy to answer any questions as they come up. So looking at what your approval rating is, you're at about an 83%. This is important to point out here is that you're at 83% approval, but your disapproval rate is a huge differential here. You're only at about 3%. You have 14% who are saying they are unsure. This is a common theme that you're going to see kind of throughout the presentation, is that there's going to be a faction of people somewhere between this 14% and about 27% on most questions that are sort of unsure, they're neutral. This is likely a faction of your membership that just doesn't actively engage with you at this time, or they're not quite sure what you might be doing, so they don't have strong opinions about what MSARA is doing. So it's important to not review this as an 83% per se. Obviously, we want to continue to raise that number over time, but it's not as if 17% of your members do not approve of what you're doing. We also, throughout the presentation, you'll see, have broken up the results by the type of member, so were they active or are they a retired member, as well as their current age. And we have provided additional information about tiers and different kinds, length of tenure with the county as well. So 82% value the benefits that are provided by MSARA. Again, paying attention to this huge differential here is important, that you do have that faction that just is a little bit neutral. They probably don't really know what the benefits are or how valuable they are to them at this time. You'll see we have also compared, unsurprisingly, retired members value these benefits more. It's just a little bit more salient to them at this time, and you can also see that progression as your members age. On the bottom here, you'll see a tracking slide. There was a survey done in 2022 internally by MSARA. It was a very small sample size and sent out to certain members. I want to just make it clear here, we provided this just so we have that tracking information available for some questions. Because of the small sample size and because it was likely a sample that was already kind of really actively involved with MSARA, the numbers are not going to be quite as accurate as a more representative finding. So I want to really make sure we're not viewing this 91% down to 82% as that you've had this significant drop in approval or the value of the benefits that are being provided over the last 2 years. This is very likely just a function of that sample composition and the sample size. So please do not view that as you dramatically dropped in the value that you're providing. We looked at, are the communications that MSARA is sending out valuable and relevant to your members? 75% agree that they are relevant to their needs. Again, you'll see kind of this difference between your active versus your retired members, as well as it becomes much more relevant to them as they get older, unsurprisingly, given the nature of the audience that we're talking about here. And again, you can see, even though, again, as I said, it's a function of the sample size and composition, there isn't a significant drop over time there as well. I can tell you, and this will come up later in the presentation, they're really responding well to the communication that is coming out of MSARA, and I'll definitely touch on that in just a little bit. 85% agree that MSARA is communicating with them in the ways that they prefer. So they're getting the information in a way that they want to receive it. And again, the slight difference between your retired versus your active members, and then as they get older. But again, paying attention to that unsure, that sort of gray bar in these charts here, it's not necessarily that you're not reaching particular audiences in the ways that they prefer, so much as they're just not actively engaging with you at this point in their careers. We then looked at trust and are their needs being met? How are they feeling about that? So you have 74% who are trusting MSARA to administer their retirement benefits. Again, you're getting about 1 in 5 here who are sort of neutral, very small amount that are disagreeing on that. So your trust levels are pretty solid. Obviously much higher among retired. And then again, as people age, you'll kind of keep hearing me say the same pattern over and over again. Again, it's more salient to them at this time. We also looked at, are their retirement planning benefits needs being met? And you're at about a 69% rating there. Again, you're a little bit larger there in terms of the neutral, not a significant increase in terms of those who are disagreeing. We definitely see that there's a significant difference between the active versus the retired members here. This might speak to something that we saw come up a little bit later on in terms of just making sure that content and resources are being targeted not just at those who are retired or even nearing retirement, but it's really kind of a holistic view, no matter where you are in your career and how close you are to retirement, that resources and information is available to you and that it's getting to them and not just on the website, but that they know that it is there. We asked them an open-ended question of what do you think MSARA does particularly well? As I mentioned earlier, communication was really the top thing that we saw here. I read through all of these open-ended responses myself, and so I can tell you that they really feel that the information that is coming out from MSARA is effective, it's clear. We consistently saw comments of it's easy to understand, it's not full of tons of jargon that really makes it confusing. They understand what's going on. They really, really like the newsletters that are coming out and really feel that you keep them informed. So the newsletters are really hitting very effectively. They also really commented on customer service and feeling that when they have interacted with MSARA staff, they receive really good information. The customer service is just superior in that respect. And then you're going to have a small subset of your membership that the thing that they care most about is that their checks arrive and they arrive on time. And so we saw those comments kind of emerge as well as, you know what, the check's in my account every time. It's there on time. It's not a problem. So I think they're doing that well. So communication, your customer service is doing very, very well. We looked a little bit further into that monthly email newsletter. 87% of the members that we surveyed said that they received this newsletter. And among those who do, 70% say they're reading it on a monthly basis. And that's a really big accomplishment to have such a large portion of your membership receiving a newsletter and then reading it on a monthly basis. There's a lot of newsletters that come out, especially via email. We all know how many emails that we get and all those newsletters that we get. So the fact that you have a membership that is reading this pretty consistently every month, that means that you are reaching them effectively with these newsletters. We can see there's some differences by active versus retired members, a little bit of a trend based on age, again, sort of that salience of the information to them. Among those who are not receiving that newsletter, so again, a pretty small amount of people who are not, most of them are saying it's just because they did not know that there was an email newsletter. So you're not getting a really significant amount of people who are just going to be completely disinterested in the newsletter. They just simply did not know that it existed. We then looked at their use of Member Direct, and we found that overall 59% are registered on Member Direct, whether they're actively using it or not. And it's a little bit higher among your active members than your retired members in terms of that usage. That might be a function of age and just comfort with online portals and online management accounts, but those were the patterns that we were seeing there. In terms of website visits, 48% have visited the website in the last year. So this is an opportunity to engage a little bit more, drive some more traffic to that website, making sure that through that potentially that email newsletter that they're aware of what is on the website, what might be available to them, new resources, webinars, seminars, whatever might be available to them to answer the questions that they may have, sort of driving that traffic to the website. You can see that there's this sort of blip that happens between the ages of 50 to 69. They're using it more because retirement's starting to become a little bit more salient to them. So they're probably checking in on it a little bit more of what steps do they need to be taking. And we specifically called out here how that breaks out in terms of that specific age group on your retired versus your active members. So among that, your active members are using it a little bit more within that age range, suggesting to us that they are using the website as a resource for gaining the information that they need to prepare themselves for their upcoming retirement. How would they like to receive information from you? Most are very comfortable with email. Unsurprisingly, probably among your older members, they're preferring mail to the home, but for the most part, you've got a strong following on email. And again, they're opening those emails as we saw with the newsletter. So that communication channel is going to continue to be effective for you. We asked them which topics for a seminar or a webinar might they be interested in attending or viewing. You're getting about half who are just not super engaged right now. It's not something that they're wanting to look into right now, but you do have, in terms of among retired and not retired members, a good amount that want information about how to use Member Direct more effectively, how to set it up, how to use it, where to check different things, where to get the information that they need, and that's really sort of the sweet spot of what they're looking for. We also looked at member education and what kinds of things that they would be interested for this. Things that are less requiring of them in real time, so not having to tune into a live webinar, but something that is recorded that they can watch at their leisure. Quick tip videos, those are sort of the more popular ones, more than a live or an in-person or a lunch and learn kind of thing. They want something that they can access on their own time. We looked at kind of digging into that customer service a little bit more. So 33, apologize for that, have contacted MSARA to receive assistance or information in the last year. As you can see, there's not significant differences in terms of they're active or retired, but slight blips on age there as well, unsurprisingly. And among those who did contact, we asked what was your satisfaction in your most recent interaction. And you can see that you had just a stellar customer satisfaction score here of 90% walked away satisfied with that interaction.
What's with
We
our-
then asked them essentially, is there a problem?
Any comment on our
Okay.
millennials in this group? It seems like those people 40 to 49 are across the board more negative on a lot of this stuff.
I think this is generally an age group where things are a little bit confusing. We do tend to see in surveys sometimes that the 40 to 59 age group is not always super happy with things. On this question specifically, this could be a function. I would have to look at the exact number. This may be just a function of, because again, you're talking about a pretty small amount. So you're only talking about 33% of that 484 who contacted. So the number of people who were 40 to 49, this may just be a handful of people. So one person's negative comment or negative interaction could be what's skewing that drastically. I mean, I can.
I'm sorry, I forgot my hearing aids today. Could you speak up a little bit?
It's like I turned it off. In our correction process, is there any category of age that was more affected by it? Do we have any notion?
The majority of the correction project affected people who are already retired, and many of them had been retired for a number of years, so they were in the higher age ranges.
Yeah.
I did go through the more detailed data, and while I'm not 100% sure it's specific to this, there were several comments saying that they weren't happy with the outcome of discussions regarding our process for DROs and what happens with divorce, and we didn't offer split accounts and things of that nature. So that might be part of what's reflected here. But again, this might end up being like one person because, again, this subset was only based on like 100 people that then got broken out into these age groups because it was just the folks who had answered that they were
Got it.
had interaction with our office in the last year. So I agree that it was probably not a large number of people, but I do have in more detail to support that, and I'll look into it again.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. Elise, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, no problem. Thank you for providing that clarification. So we then, in these two charts, on the left-hand side, what we're looking at is which topics have they received information about, and then on the right-hand side is what topics would they like to learn more about from MSERA. So you can see what it is that they're accessing on the left. They're looking at the financial reports, they're looking at COLA increases and investment reports as kind of their top three, but it's really a bit sporadic in terms of what they're looking at, but about 1 in 4 in terms of what's going on there. And then in terms of what they're interested in learning about, COLA increases, death benefits, and their beneficiaries were the top two. And we saw that reflected a little bit in the open-ended responses as well. There was concerns about those cost of living increases, unsurprisingly, given what's been kind of going on economically in the country and just discussions always in the news about inflation rates and things like that. So it makes sense that this is a little bit top of mind for them. We asked among active, deferred, and unknown members, what are they most concerned about when they think about their retirement? What we saw was, unsurprisingly, and this is not unique, certainly to MSERA, but really across the board of anybody getting thinking about retirement or what retirement's going to look like in the future, not having enough money to retire or maintain their current lifestyle is certainly top of mind. Concerns about how they're going to afford or access health insurance and what their medical costs will be and how they're going to offset that. Definitely some concerns about cost of living increases and affordability, again, with what we're seeing with inflation that happened over the last few years, still kind of really top of mind for people. Even if there has been some cooling, it's going to take a while for that to really level out in people's minds. And then a little bit in terms of the safety and stability of their investments in MSERA. From what I read in the open-ended responses, it didn't seem like this was a direct attack on anything that MSERA was doing explicitly in terms of investments or the funds that you're using, but rather just concerns about the economy in general and is money going to be there and available to them in more of a general sense rather than specific things that MSERA is doing or not doing. We then asked among retired members, what is their biggest concern when they think about the rest of their retirement? Again, not having enough money to last to the remainder of their lifetime is sort of that top of mind thing. Again, some concerns about affordability and cost of living increases. So that's just really top of mind for everybody right now. Some, again, about the stability of MSERA and the retirement fund still being available to them in the future. Again, I didn't see massive critiques on, what MSERA is doing, but rather just insecurity. If you turn on the news in the last year, they're kind of been threatening recession for a while or threatening crashes and things like that. And so it's a little bit of doom and gloom for the average person. And so there's some insecurity about that. But again, not anything specifically that MSERA is doing. And then some concerns about medical coverage and insurance affordability from a health perspective. We asked them, what services would you like MSERA to consider providing in the future that it does not currently? What's important to note here is that an overwhelming majority said that they were satisfied with what MSERA currently offered. They didn't really have any suggestions. They said, it's looking good. I'm getting what I need. Of those who did suggest services, we looked at some concerns about what would be available in terms of medical insurance plans or resources for retirees. That may not be feasible, obviously, to provide medical insurance, but at least directing them to the places and the resources that can help them with that would probably be very beneficial for your members. They would like to see some more targeted information for those who are further out for retirement. Again, this is not unique to MSERA. We've seen it with other retirement agencies as well, that a lot of information is often tailored to that 10 years or less, I should say, out for retirement. And so making sure that information is getting to them, it may be already available, but making sure it's really reaching them about, what you should be doing when you're 30 years out, 20 years out, 15 years out, and just making sure that you can sort of alleviate some of those concerns that they have among those active members of, am I going to have enough money? Am I saving enough? Am I doing enough? Am I going to be able to afford to retire? How long is it going to take me to be able to retire? Just alleviating a lot of those concerns by making sure that the information that is coming out from MSERA is tailored to them as well, and that they have the resources and the information that they need to take the steps that they need to do earlier on in their careers. I also saw some suggestions of social groups or peer-to-peer learning forums. So just a spot where they can ask each other questions about their experiences in the transition to retirement or what challenges that they might be having, or just even posting about membership social groups that might pop up so that they can continue to socialize with each other. This is something that we see among retired members where they want to have some active social interaction with others who are retired now that they have all this free time on their hands. And then just a kind of overview, the demographics. So this just breaks out who answered the survey in terms of what type of member that they were, their age, what plan they fell into, the years of service that they had with the county, and how many years they are out from retirement if they were not yet retired. And I want to thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Jardy.
Yeah, thanks. So I think our newsletter is very good, and I appreciate the fact that we get so many people actually reading it. That's encouraging. I'm curious about some of, is it Leash? Some of your comments about ways that MSARA newsletter might be more frequently read by the under 50 crowd, active employees. And so do you know, for example, are the people who are under 50 not reading it, are they current active employees? Because we do have people who are vested who are now working somewhere else. So do we have enough information? Do we get enough data to know whether they're reading it? The ones who aren't reading it are active employees, or are they working somewhere else and maybe just kind of tuning out MSARA, knowing that they'll get something as part of their bigger pension? Maybe they're working in Sonoma or some other place.
Dan, if you don't mind.
I'm going to defer that one to Doris because she probably has a better sense of your classifications than I do.
I do have that level of detail. I actually don't have an answer for you right now, but we did have a number of deferred members respond. So I don't know if the folks who aren't really reading the newsletter are maybe the deferred because they're, working at a reciprocal agency or something, and it's just not, high on their list right now, or if it's active members. I do think we need to do a better job of outreach to the safety and probation members because we didn't get a lot of survey interaction from those groups, but those groups are also certainly much smaller than the general memberships at large. But I'd be happy to look into that and let you know.
Okay, thanks. My follow-up to that was, it looked like there were some members who said they would like to get the information in a different format. It may be a small group, but I'm guessing the ones that said they wanted text messages are probably the under 50 crowd, maybe the under 30 crowd. So one, if that's an option, and I don't know that it is, but if it was an option for the newsletter to be texted, let's say once a year or twice a year to the members, if we had their cell phone numbers, I'm looking for your feedback, but maybe if in particular the demographic that wants it in that format, maybe instead of just emailing the newsletter, maybe it would be emailing a video clip that we've got for someone who is younger about financial planning, because many of them I doubt are necessarily thinking about retirement at under 30, but they might be thinking about financial health and anyway, I'm just wondering if there's a way of kind of doing a targeted texting, if that might make sense.
Right now, we
to
don't
get them
have
in
the capacity to text.
and reading the newsletter.
Sorry about that. Right now, we just don't have the capacity to text, although that might be something that we could look into. I do have more detailed information, so part of that is going to be reviewing that level of detail and trying to find out what segments we're not reaching, and then trying to look at ways that we can better reach those groups. So I hope to bring forth in the board work plan some specific initiatives on how we'll be trying to incorporate the information we learn from this process to better serve different underserved target groups in our membership.
Trustee Shoemaker?
That's a great line of question, Dan. Noticing this page 21, it says deferred is 5.2. But interesting, you look at the age category, and less than 31, it's 1.5%. And 1.5% of, say, 500 people is only about 35, right? Am I right there? Less, yeah, it's like 1.5 times 5, 7.5, 8. So the negative comments in the big scheme of things, I don't care, I don't read, in the survey is really heavily tilted. But what the bigger question to me is, how many people under 30 work for the county total that didn't respond at all? And I think that a deeper dive into these, like a targeted public safety survey where they're called out, this is for you, we see issues with, blah, blah, blah. And then, if you remember in the past, Dan was a real pusher of education about retirement other than our system, which I think is super beneficial. But it's a little discouraging to see PEPRA people and young people ignoring the information we can give them about how to prepare for when they're older. Because if they get there and realize there's no COLA, I didn't put anything in the bank, they're going to be in big trouble. And I know there's a lot more for all young people. When we were young, everybody up here who considers himself old, we didn't care about retirement much, and I think it's worse now than it's ever been, and more important now. So to help them with information that way. Thank you.
Trustee Comer?
I just want to provide some narrative in response to Vice Chair Shoemaker's comments, and I do agree with a lot of what he is asserting in his opinion. And I've encountered the same situation when I was working with the executive director and trying to talk with safety members about PEPRA retirement and the fact that they won't have a COLA and that they need to take additional steps to guarantee their financial security once they retire. And I'm often met with deaf ears of no response, even to the point of offering for the executive director or her staff to meet with them during their monthly meetings to provide information. And I think that's also reflective of this survey. And I just want to bring that, my rough math estimates here is we have like 3,700 plus in our membership report for this month between active, deferred, inactive, and retirees. And we got 480 some responses. So we're basically at like between a 1/7 and a 1/8 of our membership that replied to this. And if you look at the views on our Mendocino County YouTube page, we're somewhere on our monthly meetings for Retirement Association in the 50 to 150 views. And again, doing that math, we know that these meetings are historically unattended and people are not interested until it matters to them. So I don't have the answer to that. I'm just providing a little narrative that it is very reflective of the engagement we normally get at every level across the board until it matters to them. And I don't have the answer on how to further engage these people, especially when it directly impacts their financial security and retirement. But I just wanted to call out that this survey is reflective of the membership engagement in general, and I don't want to get over obsessed about some of the negative comments that are reflecting a very small, tiny portion of our membership, because if they were engaged and cared to participate in the survey, I think some of those statistics would be more slanted.
I would like to point out that when we talk about the tiers that folks are in, that includes the tiers for retired members. But we do have a good representation from retired membership with less from active, but we will be trying to look at ways that we can improve that outreach. And I have offered to do, departmental meetings and group meetings, and I even offered at the department head meetings, and actually no department has taken me up on that. So we do need to find a way to maybe make that information more accessible to in the formats that people want on demand, with maybe short quick tip videos and things of that nature, and those will be strategic plan action items that once we have a chance to work through the data on a more detailed level and devise some approaches to what we determine may be underserved markets, we'll add those items to the board work plan.
Thank you. Are there any more comments, discussion? Thank you very much for your presentation, Elise Basil. And thank you for all the hard work.
Yes, thank you for having us. It was a pleasure. We hope to be able to work with you again in the future.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any further discussion? Any public comment?
There's no public comment?
Okay, moving on to agenda item 5, regarding the board strategic plan calendar and board work plan. Director Rentschler.
Thank you, Chair Cavness. I provided updates to the board work plan and the board strategic calendar. I also, one of the trustees requested a prior meeting, provided some information on past accomplishments. I did want to point out that the last time I think accomplishments were brought to the board might have been 2022. So I went ahead and developed a comprehensive list going back through all the strategic plans available to MSERA. So this really reflects achievements from 2012 through 2023. And if you have any questions on any of the documents or any of the past achievements, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any board member discussion? None. Is there any public comment?
There's no public comment?
Okay, thank you. Discussion regarding the administrative report. Director Rentschler.
Thank you, Chair Cavness. The administrative report provides a couple of reminders for the board. We have an audit kickoff meeting for the audit committee immediately following the May meeting on Wednesday, May 15th. There is also the California Public Retirement Systems, which is CalPERS Virtual Trustee Roundtable, being held on Friday the 17th, and you can contact Judy to register if you're interested in attending the trustee roundtable. The last time we did an off-site strategic planning session was in February of 2022, and I wanted to see if there was any interest in the board in doing a strategic planning or off-site educational meeting in fiscal year 25. If there's any preference by the board for that, I'd like some direction. The rest of the updates have to do with status of some pension gold updates. The member status confirmation project, I would say, has been fairly successful. We sent out notices to members 85 and a half and up. We didn't get down to age 70 yet due to staffing issues, but at this point we only have 5 people who have not provided a response.
Trustee Terdy, did you have a comment? Oh, okay.
I would like board direction on whether or not I could attend the National Conference on Public Employee Retirement Systems 2024 Public Pension Funding Forum. This organization we've only been a member of for about a year, but this particular pension funding forum has 5 particular segments in it that relate to mature plans and funding issues for mature plans, and that is certainly an issue that is facing MSERA as we go forward. I believe Siegel had mentioned that we are like the most mature plan in the state of California as far as our ratios of active employees to non-active employees who either are or will be eligible to draw benefits. If we're not the most mature, we're close to the top of that list. So I am interested in attending that if possible. We can have money in the budget to cover this by my not attending something else that was scheduled, like the Fall Sackers Conference. We can utilize the money to cover this. It is in Boston and would require CEO approval, so I'm asking for board direction to reach out to the CEO's office.
Trustee Harris?
I think you should reach out to the trustee's office. I think this would be something that would be beneficial for us as a plan and for our executive director as well, and I would like to see that support from our board.
Trustee Kilber?
This would be after the current fiscal year, so couldn't an adjustment be made to the training budget at that time to add? Because I'd like to see you go to both.
Yes, this is conference is actually in fiscal year 25, which that budget has not yet been adopted, so we could certainly add to the existing budget to account for this and not cut anything else off. That's true.
So unless there's any other major objections, I would like us to give direction for her to coordinate with the CEO's office to get approval for out-of-state travel. And I did have one other comment.
Yes.
I think that this membership status confirmation is a success, and I wanted to relay my pleasure that that many people had responded. And as a secondary fail-safe, we were notified, or at least confirmed, of 7 recent deaths, which is something we're trying to prohibit of somebody being paid a benefit after they pass. And although none of those instances were a delayed death notification, it is that secondary confirmation to make sure we're catching any potential issues where we're paying somebody that should not be paid. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for that. And I think moving forward, if we have the staff to expand it, I think the board would be, agreeable to that.
Great, thank you for that direction. It is something I think was successful, and I'd like to see it expanded once we get restaffed. As you know, we're down 2 retirement specialists. I would like to mention, because I didn't put it in the administrator report, that we had the job listing open. I believe it just closed, so we will be looking at doing interviews to hire for a retirement specialist. Judy, that did close, didn't it?
Sorry, yes, I believe it did, and I should be hearing something at any moment.
Okay. I am registered to attend the SACRS conference in May, the spring conference. I did expect to have the business packet available for board review, but it was not provided by SACRS yet. I do not know if there's any voting items other than routine things like adoption of the minutes and their financial statements. So I do apologize that the business packet was not yet available for distribution with this. We did attach a couple of legislative updates, and we attached I believe we attached the slate of candidates so there could be direction to me for the voting proxy for the board of directors for SACRS. Hold on just a sec, I'm trying to.
The budget, my apologies, but we forgot to sort of mention that we're going to be sending out preliminary budget for review this Friday.
Yes, the draft budget will go out to all trustees for your feedback on Friday. We're asking for your feedback by, I believe, May 8th, May 3rd, I'm sorry, so we can incorporate any request or changes from the board into the budget that would be brought at the May meeting for adoption.
Is there any more discussion on the legislative update or any of the Trustee Harris?
Just a question, do we ever send anyone to Council of Institutional Investors? Or is CII, I know the big pension funds go, CalPERS, CalSTRS are there, and I've never heard it even brought up to.
Certainly not in my tenure here, and I'm not familiar with MSARA ever sending anybody. I am familiar with that. Fresno, I believe, had some staff attend that while I was working there, but not to my knowledge. We have not done that here.
I think it's something we may want to take a look at in the future. You often get some of the people who are really in the news attending, and it's just a little bit more cross-pollination that I think could be an advantage to our group, even though we are minuscule by comparison. Some fine presentations.
Trustee Swoop?
Yes, where do they typically hold those?
Often they're in DC, New York City, but we're inching toward $1 billion portfolio. Going to come sooner rather than later. I'd like to see it broaden a little bit.
Is there Trustee Shoemaker?
Catherine, with your experience with SACRS, do you have any comments on the nominating election list?
Actually, I think that the President McDonald, I think that he's a wonderful candidate, and I would highly recommend him. I was also looking for the slate and was not able to find it. It is
Item 6.
because
Yeah, isn't that the? think,
Yes, page 2 of that
I,
Backers trustees notice.
I see that the people who are, you
yeah,
know,
go up to page 2, and it says, the Sackers Nominating Committee recommends the following slate: President David McDonald, Vice President Adele Taggiola, Treasurer Jordan Kaufman, Secretary Zandra Chomondelli, I apologize for mispronouncing everybody's name,
No.
regular member David Gilmore, and regular member Rhonda Weissmeyer.
So I do know Mr. McDonald, and I do know the Secretary Zandra Chimondali. But the rest of them, I just read their, you know, what they submitted, and I would recommend to, if that's what's on the slate, I would recommend to support the slate.
Thank you.
I did have a question for council. Since the business packet wasn't available for the board's review, can they take direction to say that I should vote at my discretion on anything that comes up on the business packet? I don't really expect there to be anything other than the routine adoption of the minutes and financial statements, but I don't know because I haven't seen the business packet yet. Or would there be direction not to vote on those items?
Well, I suppose the board could give you discretion to vote on those items, but without knowing what those items are, I guess that's a call for the
Or maybe
board to make.
to vote for the consent agenda, but not to vote on items that are not part of the, you know, regular consent agenda or something?
I mean, they can give you that direction, whether that's a good idea when the trustees don't know what the items are.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Okay.
I think if you find something that there is controversy over and significant, and I don't know that it's worth having a special meeting over, but if it really was something that rose to that level, that could happen, but it seems unlikely.
Okay. So at this point, it would just be direction from the board on the slate of candidates and nothing related to the business meeting.
Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none. I think is there any public comment on this? So moving forward, we're going to go into closed session, and will be about a conference with the real property negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, property of 625 King Court, Suite A, negotiator Doris Rentschler. Negotiating party is the state of California, and under negotiation is price and terms of the lease. So we're now going to go into closed session.
Conference room A is available now, so.
Returning to open session at 9:47. Please report out of closed session, Council Burke.
Thank you. The board met in closed session on agenda item 7, conference with real property negotiator, and gave direction to its negotiator.
Okay, there's possible action regarding renewal of the lease with the California Department of General Services, Department of Rehabilitation. Presenter, Director Rentschler.
Thank you, Chair Cavness. The draft lease is provided for the board's review. The state will provide a original hard copy for actual execution, but this is for your review to ensure that it's meets the items that we had previously discussed. As mentioned, the state has requested a 12-year lease term, and if you have any questions regarding the lease, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the lease as proposed.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Judy, is there any discussion on the motion? Judy, would you like to do a roll call vote?
Yes. Mr. Kelly? Ms. Cavness?
Yes.
Mr. Jurdy?
Yes.
Mr. Cromer?
Aye.
Mr. Shoemaker? Ms. Harris?
Aye.
And Mr. Land?
Aye.
Approved.
Motion passes. Okay. Okay, and we are on to our general board member discussion. Is there any board member discussion? Seeing none, we can adjourn, and the next board meeting is Wednesday, May 15th at 8:30 a.m. Meeting is adjourned at 9:49.